The Freethinkers of the Year award is my favorite time at the convention because this is when we recognize state church litigants, usually successful, but they should all be one. But in this case, we have 3 members and a 4th who could not be here today who made possible winning lawsuits. Could we have that back door closed, please? The one that over there. Only that one's to be, yeah, thank you, that'll make it quieter. So our first Freethinker of the Year was Ishmael Jaffrey, who won a Supreme Court case in, I think it was 1985. And we have had many, many wonderful Freethinkers of the Year. And without their help, without their feet on the ground, their willingness to speak up, we cannot cure many of these Establishment Clause violations. So we are going to introduce to you the Freethinkers of the Year, and it's very special to me that the staff attorneys who have worked closely with them will be able to introduce them one at a time. So I'm going to call up Attorney Sam Grover.
Right. So yeah, just to echo Rebecca from earlier, we're up to 7 full-time staff attorneys and 2 full-time legal fellows at FFRF, which is amazing. I've been telling people all weekend that over the last 8 years, we've added 1 attorney per year, and we haven't hit that sweet spot yet where adding an attorney reduces the amount of work that any of us has to do. So that's pretty incredible growth for a nonprofit, and so thanks to all of you for making that possible. We couldn't do it without our membership support. Yeah, give yourselves a hand, please. Now, in order to keep all of those attorneys from stepping on each other's toes, between the 9 of us, we've divided the country into regions, usually based on the federal circuits. And I'm the lucky guy who gets to deal with Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi, which there's some very interesting stuff coming out of there, mostly from Texas, because we have a lot of members from Texas, and there are a lot of violations there. So those 2 things combined give me a lot of work to handle. And as a result, I spend much of my time messing with Texas. Oh, good. That's a Dan Barker joke, so you can send your comments to him. So in recent years, there's been a trend, mostly in the southern states, of placing "In God We Trust" decals on the back of police vehicles. And that's something we've seen all over the place, but it's the national motto, and it makes for a tough legal challenge. The courts seem to buy into this idea that it's secular in some sense, which we don't agree with. But from our standpoint, it's better to try to educate sheriffs on why they should try to be more inclusive than it is to sue. But in some special cases, sheriffs have gone beyond "In God We Trust" on the back of vehicles. That phrase, for instance, was not explicitly religious enough for Sheriff Ronnie Dodson out of Brewster County, Texas. He got the bright idea to go one step further and put a Christian cross on the back of a bunch of his patrol vehicles. He added this, it's an 8-inch cross decal in black with a thin blue line. Get it? He put it on the back of 6 patrol vehicles in December of 2015. And at the time, he told media that he did it because he, quote, wanted God's protection over his deputies. So we learned about the crosses pretty quickly, and so a few days before Christmas, we sent a letter of complaint to the sheriff explaining why the crosses needed to come down. Now, Sheriff Dodson, he didn't like our letter, and neither, as it turns out, did Governor Greg Abbott, who filed a brief with the state attorney general's office insisting that the display of Latin crosses on government property did not violate the Establishment Clause. Yeah, imagine that. Thanks for clearing that up for us, Greg Abbott. So ignoring the governor's nonsense FFRF, with me and fellow attorney Patrick Elliott serving as co-counsel, sued Sheriff Dodson and Brewster County 3 months later in March of 2016 to get the crosses removed. Of course, the only reason we were able to sue at all or so quickly was thanks to the assistance of two brave local members, Kevin Price and Jesse Castillo, who served as the local plaintiffs essential to the survival of our lawsuit. And that's why I'm telling you this story now, because it took courage and conviction to do what Kevin and Jesse did. They live in Brewster County and were willing to be named plaintiffs in the lawsuit challenging this aggressive religious endorsement by the community's Christian majority. And it took even more courage to sue the Brewster County Sheriff when both Kevin and Jesse were active within the law enforcement community in Brewster County. Yeah. And yet, both Kevin and Jesse answered this call. So what happened with the lawsuit? Shortly after we filed, the Brewster County Sheriff's Office took down the crosses. The county agreed through a legally binding consent decree not to place cross decals on Sheriff's Office vehicles in the future. They also agreed to pay Kevin and Jesse $1 each in nominal damages, which is a symbolic acknowledgement of past constitutional violations against them, as well as paying $22,370 in attorney's fees and court costs. So in short, we won swiftly. Yeah. So I actually have two Freethinker of the Year awards to hand out right now, and the first goes to Kevin Price, who could not be here today. A few months ago, Kevin moved to northern Syria in order to serve under the US-supported YPG, which is a mainly Kurdish peacekeeping force with foreign volunteer support that has been fighting ISIS in the region. Kevin wishes he could be here to accept his Freethinker of the Year award, and he wrote to me right before this to say that he sees our legal victory over Brewster County as essential in keeping law enforcement agencies in check. He writes, quote, "I think FFRF's swift action was a good criticism for Brewster County Sheriff's Office to hear, as a lot of law enforcement types won't criticize themselves. FFRF's actions serve to educate them and other locals that nationalizing religion in any way won't be tolerated." So, for Kevin's part in blowing the whistle on the Brewster County Sheriff's crosses and for educating the county on the necessity of the Establishment Clause, please give him a brief round of applause. We'll be sending him his award and all of your well wishes. And so that brings me to our second awardee. Jesse Castillo was born in Spain during his father's military service and grew up in Panama, New Mexico, Louisiana, and Florida. And then in the early 1990s, he served in the US Army, graduating from Army Ranger School. After serving in the military, Jesse earned an associate's degree from Miami-Dade College and later moved to Brewster County, Texas, where he took a job in law enforcement and befriended Kevin Price, contacted FFRF, and decided to take an emphatic public stand against government promotion of religion. Yeah. So I'm going to leave it at that because Jesse is here today, and I want to give him time to speak about his experiences as a freethinker. So thank you, Jesse, for standing up for the First Amendment and making possible this important legal victory. You are certainly deserving of the title Freethinker of the Year. Congratulations, man. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. So like he said, this is another case out of Texas. I'm really glad the Freedom from Religion Foundation has no problem messing with Texas. I'm not originally from Texas. My wife and I moved to Alpine, Texas back in 2007, along with our 3 boys. Alpine is in Brewster County, which happens to be the largest county in the state of Texas. However, its population is only about 9,000 people in the entire county, and about 6,000 of that 9,000 live in our small town of Alpine. A little more than a year and a half ago, Christian crosses began appearing on our local sheriff's police vehicles. The crosses were basically large stickers, as Sam pointed out, that were in the shape of Christian crosses, and they were placed on the back windows of some of the police vehicles. The crosses also featured that thin blue line he mentioned, representing support for law enforcement. Not all of the police vehicles from the Brewster County Sheriff's Office had these Christian crosses on them. And the sheriff himself, Ronnie Dodson, didn't actually order his deputies to place these crosses on the vehicles. He just allowed his deputies, to place the crosses if they wanted to, and many of them did just that. Our county sheriff, as he mentioned, told one of our local newspapers that allowing the crosses to be displayed in this manner was his way of showing his support for his deputies. Those Christian crosses that were being used back then are still being sold in a small print shop in our town, and our lawsuit actually led to the boosting of sales of those crosses. And the crosses are currently displayed on many private vehicles in Alpine. But of course, we weren't trying to stop people from placing crosses on their personal vehicles. During that time they were displaying crosses, there was some online debate on the Sheriff's Department's Facebook page. And there was one particular post that was very popular. It had thousands of likes, and it was highly shared. And this particular Facebook post stated, "Dodson wanted God's protection over his deputies, and the thin blue line on the crosses stands for law enforcement." So it was a belief among some Christians that just the mere presence of a cross could help protect law enforcement officers. Well, as an atheist and as a U.S. Border Patrol agent, I can think of real ways for increasing the safety of our police officers. Better training and better equipment would be much more effective than relying on a cross for protection. This is just another example of some of the absurd beliefs held by religious people. To many people, the displaying of Christian crosses on police vehicles is not a big deal. I even have friends and family members that seem to think it's not that big of a deal, and they definitely don't think that something like this is important enough to sue over. Well, it is. It is worth taking action to try and stop violations like this to prevent bigger problems down the road. Crosses on government property obviously go against our nation's principle of the separation of church and state. And for our county, it was basically saying our sheriff's department knows which is the one true correct religion, and if you believe in that religion too, then you're on the right side. It was very divisive. Of course, the Christian cross itself can mean many different things to different people, but as many of us know, the teachings in Christianity represented by that cross are not always good. The teachings are false, many are just downright horrible and even dangerous. When our local police were displaying these crosses, it made myself and others wonder if our sheriff's deputies were going to be fair and impartial to a public that includes people of different faiths and people like myself who identify as atheist. I wasn't always non-religious. I grew up going to Christian churches, and I was actually very enthusiastic about Christianity at an early age. But shortly after reaching adulthood and entering the U.S. Army many years ago, I had already seen too many inconsistencies in churches and inconsistencies in what I was reading in the Bible, and I could no longer call myself a Christian. I still believed in a God, and I had a strong fear of burning in hell, which kept me tormented for many years and kept me believing in God longer than I should have. But through the years of analyzing my own beliefs about spirituality and about reality, I moved closer and closer to becoming an atheist. Before I had ever met an open atheist, I basically believed that a religious person would be a more moral person, and an atheist would be a person that was more prone to engaging in immoral behavior. But the first open atheist I ever got to know on a personal level happened to be a person with good moral character, had good work ethic, and had a good sense of humor. He was someone that I admired and even looked up to. Having known this atheist and many other atheists helped to break down my misconceptions about what it means to be an atheist and also what it doesn't mean to be an atheist. So I think it really helps when religious people get exposed to atheists who are open about their religious views, and I especially think it's helpful when they get to know an atheist on a personal level. It's important for atheists not to shy away from religious discussions. I recently had an atheist friend tell me that he doesn't ever like to engage in religious discussions with people because he says, you're never going to change their minds anyway. And it may be true that you will never get a religious person to completely reject his religion, but I know from experience that you can get them to question their own beliefs, and over time, they can change their stance on religion. And of course, there are more effective ways at discussing religion with religious people, and there are times and places where discussing religion may be inappropriate. It is very important for government to stay out of religion so that people can be more comfortable expressing their own religious views publicly. I would hate to think that if we hadn't sued our county and allowed them to promote Christianity in that way, that it would have led to some closeted atheists to decide to remain closeted. I happen to know a few closeted atheists in Alpine, and I know two that have come out recently. People should feel free to discuss religion without our government telling us which religion they think is the correct one. I actually enjoy it when Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses come knocking at my door. It gives me a chance to share my views and ask them questions too. As an atheist, I also have good news to share. Another problem with having a sheriff's department displaying Christian crosses has to do with the potential for profiling. I've never heard of a case of police profiling against an atheist before, but since some Christians already think atheists are just bad people and somehow morally bankrupt, I wouldn't put it past a religious fundamentalist with crazy ideas who happens to be a police officer to begin feeling emboldened, especially when their department's giving them a wink and a nod. I just think that mixing law enforcement with religion is a really bad idea. I have not faced any backlash over this lawsuit, and I just want to mention that Sheriff Dodson's family are actually really good people. I've known his son for many years and worked with him in the past, and the sheriff's wife is actually an outstanding veterinarian who takes care of not only my pets, but my co-plaintiff's pets, took care of them for many years. They've been good to me before the lawsuit, and they continue to be friendly towards me after the lawsuit. Like I said, our town is a really small town. Most people I have met there are really good people. I just think they made a bad decision. I'm glad we were there to correct it. I really want to thank the Freedom from Religion Foundation and the two outstanding attorneys that were involved in this case, Sam Grover and Randall Callanan. I also want to thank my good friend and former coworker, Kevin Price, who couldn't be here today. Thank you.